Hey, good afternoon. My name is Dave Baranek. My call sign's Bio. I was an F-14 radar intercept officer, or RIO. That's the guy in the back seat of the two-seat F-14 Tomcat, like Goose in the movie Top Gun. And now the Top Gun's come out, all you have to say is like Goose. And I was also a Top Gun instructor, and I was an instructor when they made the movie. Um, I served in the Navy for 20 years. I retired in 1999. I flew F-14s for most of that time. Once I retired, I got the idea to write a book about my experiences, and so I did. And I'm here to talk to Mike and aircrew interviews today to tell you about my experiences and answer whatever questions you have. So,
Well, brilliant. Well, thanks for being on the show, Bio. So, when did you first become interested in aviation?
I would have to say, I've thought about that, and I would have to say that it was around 10 years old. Before that age, I can think back. I had these ideas of various jobs I wanted to do. One of them was like to be an astronomer, just the typical thing that kids do when they're little. But once I thought about being a pilot, I picked that, and I never wavered after I made that decision. It had to be around 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Then I used the word pilot when I'm a RIO. My goal was to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to either go Air Force or Navy the whole time I was a teenager. And in fact, it wasn't until the last possible day when I had to choose in high school when I had to choose whether to go Air Force ROTC or Navy ROTC in college. That was the day that I picked the Navy. And for me, that worked out well because I wanted to fly fighters. And in my freshman year of college, my eyesight went bad. So I had to wear glasses. And you can't be a pilot and wear glasses. Now there's all kinds of options for corrective surgery, but in 1975, that wasn't an option.
Of course.
So the F-14 was new. And I just said, you know what? I'll set my goal on becoming a backseater in the F-14 Tomcat. Now, they still had more applicants than they had seats, and the standards were very high. So I still had to select that. I had to request it, compete for it. But eventually, I made my way, and I became an F-14 RIO.
Mm. So, could you tell us about your flight training? When did it start?
I hope you've got a drink also wherever you are watching this. Yeah, my flight training started in NAS Pensacola in 1979. And I was fortunate. I got to go to Pensacola just a couple of weeks after I graduated from college. So that took about 8 months in Pensacola. No, 11 months. 11 months in Pensacola. And that was basic aviation training, which all NFOs and pilots go through. Then they split the pilots off and send them to pilot training bases, and all the NFOs go to the basic NFO squadron for several months. Then they split them off, and they send them to the training in their community, like Bombardier Navigator or RIO. So the whole duration of that was about 11 months. Then I headed out to NAS Miramar in San Diego, where I spent another 8 months in the F-14 RAG. The RAG is the RAG. It's a obsolete term, which used to stand for Replacement Air Group, but now it's called Readiness Training Squadron, I believe, RTS. Mm-hmm. But everybody still calls it the RAG, and that's where every type of airplane has a RAG, and it trains new guys to fly that type of airplane. So when I was at the RAG, I was there for 8 months. I got about 95 flight hours in the F-14. And when I finished the RAG, I was sent to a fleet squadron. It was April 1981, and I was combat ready. Although, as I was to learn, I still had a lot to learn.
So, obviously, going back to the RAG, what were your first thoughts when you saw the F-14?
Mike, to look back at that now, or for a novice to look at the airplane, you would look at it and you would think it's very complex. And when we got out there, we knew it was complex, but my feeling was, cautious optimism and, confidence,
Yeah.
because just a year before that, I'd been in college, graduated from college in June of 1979, got to the F-14 RAG around July of 1980. And I go, I've come a long way already. The Navy's got this good training program. And so, I felt like, okay, this is my new machine. On the other hand, it's big. You can't deny it's a big airplane.
It's huge.
Yeah. And it was impressive, but I don't really remember feeling intimidated or anything like that.
So, can you remember your first trip in an F-14?
Oh yeah. I flew with a guy named Crush Gallhofer. We were going to fly in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. We were supposed to take off around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and the maintenance didn't have an airplane ready because the planes had just been beat up all week, and so they didn't have any up airplanes. So everybody wanted to just call it a week and get out of there. But Crush really wanted to go flying because I needed to get my first flight at Miramar so that he and I could fly to Denver the next day.
Right.
So he goes, I was his ticket to Denver. So the duty officer, the maintenance control guys, everybody goes, can we just go home? And he goes, nope. He goes, we're going flying. And so it had to be done in daytime also, even though Crush, had more than 1,000 hours. He was a lieutenant instructor pilot. And I was a student Rio. The first flight had to be all daytime. And so, finally around 5:30 or something, we walk out to the jet and climb in, whatever time, an hour before sunset. We walked out, climbed in. The base was silent because there was no one else flying. We're the only two guys out there working, our small crew, plane captain, starting guys, and all that stuff. We started up, took off, and, it wasn't just like the simulator, because nothing can prepare you for that afterburner takeoff.
I can imagine.
But the procedures were just like the simulator. So all you've got to do is, compartmentalize your senses and say, like, focus, focus, focus. And we got through it. I believe it was this flight, my very first flight, when I started up the system, and I had nothing but little dots on my scope. No text, and Crush goes, well, did you push all the display buttons? And that's like the second thing you're supposed to do when you start up. And I go, no. I go, that would probably be pretty important. Yeah. So he goes, yeah. He goes, who is this guy? Anyway, so it all went much better after that. So we did our quick flight. He goes, well, you want to go supersonic? I go, yes. But so have you ever been supersonic in a jet fighter, Mike?
I haven't, no, unfortunately.
Okay. Guess what? It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You sit there, you watch the needle go up. Suddenly it goes, above 1.0, and he goes, okay, that's it. So then we came back and landed, went home. He goes, okay, be here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock or whatever. And we took off and headed to Denver. And as soon as, he's evaluating me the whole time, because it is a training flight for me, and I'm a student.
Yeah.
So, he's evaluating my flight planning, my communications, my navigation. We get airborne. He goes, find some targets on the radar. So.
Yeah.
But, what a classroom, an F-14.
I know, yeah.
For the weekend.
Yeah, so could you tell us about your first squadron, frontline squadron you were posted to?
Oh, yeah. My first squadron, I joined it in April 1981, and it was VF-24, the Fighting Renegades. And we were flying F-14A Tomcats. Now, at that time, like I said, there were still some Phantom squadrons around, but there were a lot of F-14 squadrons, and VF-24 had recently won a few of the awards given out to the F-14 community.
Okay.
So it was, it was a good, strong squadron, had good spirit. And I joined it as an ensign. I didn't know what to expect. So I just walk into them, and, I'm going, well, this is my new squadron, and they're looking at me like, this is our new guy, you know. One of my friends from Pensacola, whose call sign was Rums, we went through Pensacola together, the RAG together, and we joined VF-24 together on the same day. And so, you know, we just walked around like, you know, Fetal D and Fetal Dumb, a couple of ensigns, you know, checking into a fighter squadron. It could be overwhelming if you didn't just say, you know, hey, this is what I do. This is my job. And also at the squadron, I mean, they get new guys all the time. And so they're ready for that. They take care of you. The duty officer, you know, you get there, you've got a check-in sheet. He calls you, you know, your the chief from your maintenance department to show you where the work center is, because, you know, you have to have a ground job in the Navy. I mean, it was you just get there and just, you know, get up to speed and join the machine. It's pretty amazing.
So did you get to choose your squadron, or was it picked for you?
That's like, just thinking back on that, I mean, I guess, I don't know if I was naive or if we were all naive, but when we got to the end of the RAG, they gave us a sheet of paper and they said, you know, write down the squadrons that you would like to go to. So Rums and I finished the RAG on the same day, and we walked around Miramar and we went to some squadrons and we talked to people, you know, okay, who's just getting back from deployment, who's just, you know, won the awards, who's got a cool looking paint scheme, you know, and, you know, ways to judge your squadron. And so I put down 3 squadrons. Well, VF-24 wasn't any of my list. So the Navy sends you where they want you to send you.
So what was the role of the squadron on the carrier?
The carrier back then, well, this hasn't changed that much, but it had 2 F-14 squadrons. Those were the days. And then when I was in VF-24, we had 1 A6 squadron, which was medium attack, 2 A7 squadrons, helicopters, E2, EA6, and probably EA3 Sky Warriors. Yeah. Detachment of a few Sky Warriors. And so the carrier deploys for several reasons. You know, a political science major or a person who that's their hobby, they could explain it very clearly. But one, it shows U.S. It's a very tangible expression of U.S. interests around the globe. 2, it puts, you know, tactical combat forces ready to go at a moment's notice, you know, around the world, because there's always several carriers deployed. Now, if you deploy to the Indian Ocean and something starts in another part of the world, well, you're going to take a few days or a week to get there, but you're going to arrive combat ready. Yeah. So when you're out on the carrier, you spend you fly maybe 2 days out of 3 or something like that, maybe every other day. And that varies also depending on a lot of things. And those are all those are training flights to some extent. Okay, for one thing, carrier landings are a very perishable skill for the pilot. But it's not just about the pilots. It's about the flight deck crew. It's about the air traffic controllers. Everyone's got to keep doing this over and over again until they do it very well. And I mean, once they get up on that level, you've got to maintain proficiency. So the more you operate, the better off it is. But in addition, we were always loading weapons, you know, downloading weapons, changing weapons, testing them. We did aerial refueling every flight. And the worst thing was, if you aerial refueled, which was it's challenging for the pilot, but it was just practice plugs because they go, well, we're not giving you any gas. So it's like, oh man, so the pilot's got to work through all that. I mean, especially night aerial refueling. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Practice bleeding.
Yeah.
So that's what the carrier does. As a fighter guy, especially, and it's changed over the years, but back in the 80s, we did a lot of simple training, simple intercept training. You know, sometimes we'd get a a person would carry an airplane would carry a jamming pod, and so we'd run against some ECM or something, but that wasn't very often. Most of the time, a lot of time, it was just 1-versus-1 intercepts, and we wanted to conserve our fuel for a variety of reasons, so we were going at max conserve airspeed, 225 knots indicated.
Wow.
And so you're just out there, 2 F-14s bumping heads, and it was kind of dull for long periods of time. But Mike, I would sit there and I'd go, I'm getting bored in an F-14.
Exactly. So I want to talk. Well, a lot of my viewers are quite interested in. I don't know what you call it in the Navy, but over here they call it DACT, Dissimilar Air Combat Training. So I'm just wondering if you went up against any of the guys, other jets on the carrier, or even Navy or the U.S. Air Force.
Oh yeah, and that's we called it just ACM, Air Combat.
Yeah.
And we used a few terms generically. There's divisions, basic fighter maneuvers, and DACT and stuff like that. And that's how long have I been talking? I haven't even talked about dogfighting, but that's what we all loved about the F-14, me included.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, Mike, my first 2 flights in Pensacola in the T2, I got airsick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it wasn't a big deal. I had a barf bag with me. And it did not dim my enthusiasm at all, because for one thing, I got over it as rapidly as my flying experience went on. So I get into the VF-24. Well, one, we'd had a taste of ACM in the TA-4s in Pensacola, and a little bit in the T2s. Then 2, we did it in the RAG, and then we get into VF-24, and so we fought whenever we could. The big thing about dogfighting is it takes a lot of gas.
Yeah.
So one way that carriers would deal with this is, and the carrier runs on a 1 hour, 45-minute cycle, or at least that's what it did back then. And they didn't want to launch a whole bunch of tankers just so the Tomcats could go to burner and dogfight. So one thing that carriers often did, or some carriers did, was the first event of the day would be a short cycle, a 1 hour cycle. So instead of 1 + 45, you would take off, you'd go do whatever ACM you could do, and then by then you'd be, after 15, 20 minutes of that, you'd be back on your fuel ladder. Okay, so the 1 hour cycle, they'd launch, whoever wanted to fight could go up and burn their fuel, use burner a lot more. So in my experience, so let's get to this. I mean, from our planning for this discussion, I knew this question was going to come up. The first time I fought an F-15 was in the RAG.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty quick.
Well, but I mean, I was a student at Rio.
Yeah.
And my pilot was another Tomcat community legend, Rat Willard. He was a RAG instructor, lieutenant back then, and later he'd be a Top Gun instructor, and I'd be there with him. But we went out and fought this F-15. I do not remember the details of that. It was 1v1. But when we landed, he goes, that went better than I thought. In the RAG, I also fought against a 2-versus-2 against a TA-4 and an F-15.
Okay, all right.
Now that's interesting, because those are 2 planes that do differently. Also, when I was in the RAG, I fought a 1-versus-2 against a TA-4 and an F-105 Thunder Chief.
Wow, okay. That's very strange.
Well, for a kid who loved airplanes all along, I just loved seeing, the mighty Thunder Chief in the air.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But we did fine, even though it was 1v2. We did great. I was flying with Drifty Smith, who Drifty, funny call sign, but he was a good stick.
Yeah.
So then out on the carrier, if we flew without using burner and without using, we had maneuvering flaps sometimes we didn't. But sometimes the A7E with maneuvering flaps and no external load, that was probably the best, one of the better opponents we could get.
Wow, that's very strange. I wouldn't have thought that. So, Bio, you obviously Top Gun is probably a big part of your, career and your story, but it's not just a movie, is it? So, you went to Top Gun as an instructor. Can you tell us about how this happened?
Yes, the and again, what I'm telling you has changed. So I don't mind. I don't think I'm revealing anything behind the curtain.
Yeah.
When I went through as a student in 1982, it was incredible. I went through with Jaws, who he was a focused pilot and a talented pilot, and he and I worked well together. We were very candid with each other about our performance, how I could help him fight the jet if I needed anything from him, etc. And our wingman was also very capable, Boomer and Jake, and we just worked well as a team. So 5 weeks of incredible flying, very challenging, but also, to go back to what we talked about earlier, I felt I was ready for it. I mean, I knew we were going up in a 2V unknown, could be 6 Top Gun guys, and it's like, let's go. I wouldn't have trepidation or anything. Get in so at the end of the class, at the little graduation ceremony, a couple of instructors said, if you want to come back, come see us. If you think about coming back as an instructor. So, I mean, that didn't really even register with me. I thought it was just like kind of a throwaway line that they said, but the thought I guess it just planted in my brain. And then 2 months later, I asked Streak, who was a former Top Gun instructor who was in VF-24, I asked Streak, I said, Streak, what does it take to be a Top Gun instructor? And so Streak said, well, what did they say when you graduated? And I said, they said, come see him. He goes, you ought to go see him. So that's how I got to be an instructor. The flying, the Top Gun instructor flying, God, that was just tremendous.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what aircraft did you actually fly at Top Gun?
Okay, so when I was there, they had single-seat A4 Skyhawks, a lot of F-5Es, and 4 two-seat. I think they had three two-seat F-5Fs, probably 3 F-5Fs.
Yeah.
And the F-5Es and Fs we had heard had been intended for South Vietnam, but they were en route. They were in production or something when South Vietnam fell, and so they said, well, they're not going there anymore. So the Navy took them. That's what we heard.
Okay.
And so I showed up there I don't remember exactly what year they got them, but I was there as an instructor. I arrived in 1984. And occasionally I would fly in the TA-4 because we flew also with the adversary squadrons. VA-45, VF-43, VF-26, VC-13, whoever. Okay, and here, I'll admit this also. I may get hate mail, but all the pilots that ever expressed an opinion liked the A4.
Okay.
The A4 Skyhawk.
Nice.
But for me, I didn't like the TA4. I loved the F5F. So, I mean, I'm not a pilot, so I just didn't like the way the TA4 felt. The F5 just felt so much better.
It certainly looks better, in my opinion.
You look at the TA4 from the right angle, it's a cool airplane, and the single-seat A4 is a pretty cool little airplane. I mean, it's just a cool little machine. And in terms of capability, for an airplane that was designed as long as, anyway, A4 was a great airplane, but I like the F5. The F5 had a lot of room. It had a very nice flight. It had controls in the back, so I got to fly. You want me to tell you a little bit about flying?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
Okay, so let's say this is a Top Gun F5, and this is a F5, and this is Bio and the instructor and the Top Gun pilot in the F5F. So we'd be flying out here in tight formation, and the pilot would go, "Okay, Bio, you've got it." So right away, I'd start controlling, and I'd drift out of formation. He'd go, okay, I got it. Now try it again. And I'd start over controlling. So it was humbling at first, flying the F-5F. But then little by little, guys give you tips and you get more experience. Mm-hmm. And then for me, just one day, it's like, blam, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so after that, I had the formation thing down. But I mean, I was just adequate, of course. And then in terms of engagements, the only time I flew an engagement in the F-5F was instructor only. Mm-hmm. I don't know what other Rios did and if they flew against the class or whatever. But I was not a good ACM pilot. It's just that exceeded my capability at the time because I didn't have the muscle memory. I didn't and you can think all you want, but just remembering to do everything and then analyzing everything, it's just like, oh, if you think up there, you're dead. Is that the line for the movie?
I think it is, yeah. I want you to actually kind of describe what your role was at Top Gun and maybe run us through a typical day or sortie that you used to conduct.
Let's get the ground stuff out of the way first.
Yeah.
All Top Gun instructors had a ground job. I think I was the aviation weapons division officer, and then I became the assistant training officer or something like that, or one of the training officers.
Yeah.
And then we all had, most instructors had 2 lectures. I had 1 lecture in the Top Gun class and 1 lecture in the FAST class. Mm-hmm. So, and FAST is, that's a outer air battle, maritime air superiority training program. I don't think they do that anymore. Mm-hmm. So if you give your lecture, you give your lecture once during a class, but then also you're always giving it to other groups. I mean, you would give it to a squadron at Miramar, you'd give it to some senior officers who were there for refresher. We fly up to El Toro Marine Corps Air Station back then, or Lemoore, and I would give one of my lectures to the Hornets. Mm-hmm. So you gave your lecture more than 5 or 6 times a year. You usually give it once or twice a month.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But after you've got it, it's not nearly as stressful subsequent times as it is the first time.
Yeah.
So then, when the class is going on, I would plan, brief, and lead about 2 flights every Top Gun class, and that there were about 30 flights during the class at that time, and every instructor. They kind of split it up. Some guys briefed 3 times. Some guys probably only briefed once. I briefed about 2 for every class. And what that means is you've got a lot of work to do. You've got a lot of planning to do. You've got put a lot of information on the board. You've got to brief the fighters on their learning objectives, which is their learning objectives, which is like the overhead or the metadata or something like that. It's the learning objectives. Then you got to brief them on the mission scenario objective. So there's two things going on here. They don't go out there like they're Top Gun students. They go out there like they're American fighter pilots in a combat environment.
Yeah.
So they've got to think both ways. Well, I mean, for the students, there's not much Top Gun to it. They're doing their mission. So I may have made too much out of this. Mm-hmm. It was the instructors who really had to be more concerned with simulating the enemy or potential adversary and being Top Gun instructors. Here's the laydown for Top Gun, and this was set from the first class back in 1969.
Yeah.
A squadron would send usually 1 airplane and the pilot and Rio if it was a 2-seater, and then a small maintenance detachment. Mm-hmm. And so the local squadrons at Miramar, that was easy. they just operated out of their home squadron usually. The Oceania squadrons usually came over with a jet from Oceania, and they actually had very good availability, but I think they all had like a letter of agreement with another squadron that if they needed to, they could borrow a Miramar squadron jet.
Right.
But I'm telling you, I mean, the whole time I was at Top Gun, very few jets of any kind missed a sortie. I don't remember any at all. Because, the maintenance guys worked very hard, and, the F-14 by that time was doing okay. So when I was there, the class was 5 weeks long, and now I believe it's 9.5 weeks, and they take their jet to Fallon, Nevada.
Yeah.
So, the Top Gun guys fly their jets, and the class guys fly their jets, and you go out over the desert or over the ocean or up to China Lake or wherever, and you do your stuff. It was awesome.
So, could you explain your time and how many years you were at Top Gun? Like, did you enjoy it? I can imagine that's a yes.
It was, when I first got there and when I was working to take over my class lecture, and actually my fast lecture also, working for my F-14 intercepts lecture, I was working 7 days a week, and I was working about 12 to 14 hours a day, Monday through Friday, from 7 a.m. to like 7 or 9 p.m.
Wow.
Flying, lecture prep, lecture practice, etc. But again, it was my choice to be there. And the other thing is, you see all these other instructors. I mean, you watched them when you were a student. You see them now when you're there, when you audit their courses for consistency and stuff. And you're on this team, and you go, I need to perform at that level. It's not like they're saying, Bio, you need to do this. It's like, this is what we all do. If you want to be on this team, you have to do, okay. So that was a surge also. Those long hours I just told you was a surge. As soon as you complete your lecture, you can go back to a normal work day, 7 to whatever. And then during the day, a big part of our job was flying jets. So
that's the cool part.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
So it was. So I was there for 2.5 years. At the end of my tour, I was thinking, this is pretty cool. I'd like to stick around. So I put my letter in. I asked the Navy to extend me 6 months, and they go, the response was very quick. No, you need to get back out to the fleet. But they did give me like one more month or something to give me a standard 30-month tour. So I said, okay, I'll take it. But also, I'll be honest with you, I was kind of missing the F-14 and being in an F-14 squadron.
Yeah.
And as much as I said the pace, slacks off, or you don't work 14-hour days. It is still it's demanding, and I talked to a couple of other instructors, and they've said that when they walked out of the hangar on their last day, they didn't have anything left. They had just put it into Top Gun.
Yeah,
and so it's it's very demanding.
So we can't speak about Top Gun without talking about the movie, can we?
Nope.
So, and you were a part of this. Could you tell us how this came about?
Mike, we did the best we could. Okay, the movie started innocently. There was a magazine, a glossy magazine called California Magazine, and an aviation, or a guy who wrote magazine articles, just wrote an article about a couple of an F-14 crew going through Top Gun as students. He just wrote the article, and he's a good writer, so he made it sound really good, and he put all the drama in and all this personality stuff. And then the photos were by Heater. So do you know who Heater is? Chuck Heatley. He published a book called The Cutting Edge back in the 80s.
No, I can't say I've heard, no.
Heater was a great photographer, but he was also a great fighter pilot. He had been a Top Gun instructor, and he'd flown some other things. He was an F-14 pilot.
Cool.
Excuse me. So his pictures illustrated the magazine article. Mm-hmm. And these producers up in Hollywood caught a glimpse of it, and they said, this would make a great movie. They immediately saw a movie in it. So they spent a couple of years planning it, getting approval and stuff, and then they showed up to film the movie. Mm-hmm. Now, there had been occasional TV shows. There was a segment of I think the Clint Eastwood movie, Firefox. Was that the Clint Eastwood movie? Anyway, yeah. Clint was in the simulator at Miramar. They didn't make a ripple, they didn't really mean anything. And so when people said, oh, these guys are coming to film this movie, I'm going like, I've seen it before, whatever. Mm-hmm. Dismissed it. Well, then they showed up, and it's like, oh, this is a big deal. Because they had all the sound engineers and all. They just had a full crew. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't excessive people either, because it was very interesting to see them, to see these Hollywood people. The production people were very professional, very careful. They're not a bunch of goof-offs. Mm-hmm. They're professional people, and they work at a high level. Mm-hmm. That's how you make a good movie.
Yeah.
The other thing was that they respected us. Now, when they make a hospital movie, they respect nurses and doctors. When they make a firefighter movie, they respect firemen. So, this was just our week, to be their subjects.
Yeah.
But, I thought they did a good job, and it certainly was amusing, if nothing else.
Amusing.
So when the first script showed up, Rat, who I mentioned before, Rat Willard, he was the project officer. He got the script, and he read it, and he goes, oh, this is terrible. And he would bring it into the ready room, and he'd read like a passage, and we'd just all go like, what? So he went and he called the Navy public affairs guys back here in Washington, where I am now. Not public affairs, but Washington. Mm-hmm. And he told them, he goes, this script is bad. And they go, well, you better help them, because this movie's getting made. So, you better help them if you don't want to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
So Rat put in a lot of time, evenings, weekends and stuff, and helped to clean up the script. And then when they finally started shooting, again, it was obvious that Tony Scott, the director, and Clay Lacey, who was a Learjet pilot and a famous racing pilot, they had a lot of talent, and they worked. They thought about the flying scenes, They thought about them, they planned them, they discussed them with us. They used models, okay, but they briefed the flights very professionally. So I will say one of the happy things that wasn't planned was the F-14 lead was Bozo.
Yeah.
Lloyd Abel. And I talked to Bozo a couple of years about this. I remember meeting him back then, but it's like, just another F-14 pilot,
Yeah.
Which, like, he probably doesn't remember me either. Just a Top Gun instructor. But I talked to him about this recently, and Bozo is a great storyteller, so I'm not going to tell the whole story. But bottom line is, I don't think he was supposed to even be involved in the movie.
Oh, really?
His squadron was on detachment. He was left back as the home guard and as the senior officer, because he was a lieutenant commander, and they started to film the movie earlier than planned. Mm-hmm. They started to film the F-14 scenes, and they said, well, we need a guy today to fly the jet. Mm-hmm. So it was Bozo, and the director, Tony Scott, said, I like you. And Bozo, he earns this. He deserves it. Mm-hmm. And you did a good job. I like working with you. You're the F-14 lead.
Wow. That's
I
pretty
mean, that's the
cool.
way I understand it. So yeah, but Bozo did a couple of things that were very helpful, and one of them is when the F-14's flying by the carrier.
Hmm.
It's a scene at the end of the movie, and it does a roll, and you're looking back between the tails
Hmm.
at the carrier. Bozo did a test flight for that. It didn't work when he looked at the film, and so he sat there and goes, "Why didn't it work? Whatever." And he had to figure out about the characteristic of the F-14's roll because of the two tails and the yaw and all this
Hmm.
other induced yaw and all this other stuff. But he did figure it out. So he got that good scene. But I mean, there's time and again he was very professional, along with Rat. Of course, Bozo and Rat had to work very closely
Hmm.
together, and they both had very high standards for briefing and leading the flying scenes.
Wow.
On the
Right.
other hand, it was fun. I mean, it's like anything you do, you find out what the limits are, and once you stay within those limits, have fun.
Yeah.
And it
Pretty.
is fun.
Very fun. So, what was your role on the movie?
Okay, one thing I did was hanging out around the squadron.
Hmm.
The actors needed to learn how to climb up an F-14. So I go, okay, I'll show you.
Hmm.
So I took like 6 of them down in the hangar, and I said, okay, pilots, you climb up like this. Rios, you climb up like this. And the reason is that when you get to the top of the ladder, the pilots go forward and the Rios go back.
Yeah.
Aft.
Yeah.
So you start differently because you have to end differently.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there's more. And then also, many people at Miramar contributed sayings. I mean, there was a Rio at Miramar. I think Sobes used to say this, who used to say, "Do some pilot shit." A guy actually said that. He told the writers, they put that down, and that was well. When Jaws and I had been flying over the desert in Yuma one time, I said, "Watch the mountains." So I said, well, you guys can use that. And so they've got that in the movie also. Goose tells Maverick, watch the mountains. So guys contributed little lines like that.
Wow.
My biggest involvement was a few flying scenes in the F-5F. I think I'm in the F-5F where they get communicated with, the inverted like that.
No, give them the bird. Yeah.
Where he gives them the bird. I'm in the back of that F-5F. Now, they filmed that scene a couple of times, but I looked at the one that came out, and I think that's me. So, Sobes, Flex, sorry if you guys think it's you, Sunshine. And then when filming was over, I went up to Paramount for 2 days with a pilot, Smegs, and who was an former F-14 pilot, and we helped them do all the dialogue.
Hmm.
So one of the things that we did was we had to tell them how to cut all these scenes together because they had a lot of scenes, but they didn't know how to put them together because they just didn't have the spatial picture. So one thing I remember is they'd have the F-14 go up like this, then they'd cut the scene, and the next thing they'd have it coming down like this.
Hmm.
And we'd go, wait a minute, if a plane goes up like this, then it's got to come down like this.
Hmm.
And you've got that, that film is over here. And they're going, oh yeah, okay. So they were they were receptive. This is our business. That's why they brought us up there, So it was, and then Smegs and I, we help them to get the scenes basically together. And then we sat there and we watched them over and over again and started talking about, what a pilot in Rio, what they would say to each other, what they'd say on the radio, and all this stuff. So we came up with a lot of that dialogue. And then, after we finished it all, I told one of the screenwriters, he was sitting right there, I go, I don't know if people are going to understand this, all the things we said. He goes, oh, don't worry, Bio. He goes, when I get done with it, they'll understand it. I was like, okay. So, he Hollywooded it all up.
Yeah.
But
there was certainly
a lot of guys contributed to that movie. There's a guy named Flex DeStaffney. He helped. He's like the dialogue consultant or something, officially listed. And then I talked to other guys who said they spent time on the phone talking to writers and stuff. So there were a lot of hands helped with that.
So I'm quite interested in. I don't know where I heard it. It might have been one of them behind the scenes, but who said it? It said the only people who have bigger egos and fighter pilots or Rios are actors. So how did you engage with each other?
I'll tell you what, that people, I've talked about that a little bit. That was not my experience.
Okay.
Possibly because the lead actors were so young.
Yeah.
Because when they filmed the movie, I was 26. Mm-hmm. And I was the youngest, 26 or 27. I was the youngest Top Gun instructor.
Wow.
And Tom Cruise was 23. So, when you're 23, 26, that's a little bit of a difference. Mm-hmm. And Tony Edwards, I believe, is the same age as Tom Cruise, Anthony Edwards, who played Goose. Mm-hmm. And they were young actors just trying to do a good job and have fun and all that. And I think they seemed enthusiastic and respectful to me. Yeah. And then I met the older guys. I met Michael Ironsides. I didn't meet Tom Skerritt. I don't think so. But Michael Ironsides, he is. He played Jester, I guess, the XO. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, he's like, hi. He's too cool for school. So it's like, okay, whatever.
So how realistic were the flying scenes? I mean, a lot of people criticize them, but are they realistic?
Yeah, they're very scripted, Mike.
Right.
Very scripted, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, they were very good. Mm-hmm. Because it's difficult to. One example was when they did the head-on passes.
Yeah.
I got these models here. I'm dying to use them.
Yeah.
So when they did the head-on passes, our standard minimum was 500 feet of separation, but the airplanes would be specs. So we had to do close passes, and I think we probably were close. We were within 200 feet, probably less. Mm-hmm. I could probably eyeball it and see. Maybe 100 feet.
Wow, that is close.
And then the other thing was they did things that were very artificial for dramatic effect, like never leave your wingman.
Yeah.
Well,
that's not true.
That's not the way we fly. Yeah. That's not the way you fly, but two F-14s flying together makes it easy to set up a conflict mm-hmm. for a non-professional movie audience. Mm-hmm. And then, the ranges at which they're shooting missiles and stuff, you do that, the guy's going to blow up in your face, and you're probably going to take your own self out. So
yeah, exactly, yeah. So a question I've always been interested in, I've not really heard about it, but how did Miramar still function with a massive? You didn't say it was a very big crew, but a movie crew on base.
They didn't have a big impact. They stayed at the Top Gun. They didn't do that much filming at Miramar. They did some filming, they did some filming, the guys walking on the flight line and stuff. But, they would just, the crew would go out there for a couple of hours, set up, do the filming, and then clean up, And some of it was done on weekends. Mm-hmm. In fact, those flight line scenes could have been done on weekends. Mm-hmm. And then the flying was not much was filmed around the base. Bozo's tower flyby was filmed on the base, and Bozo's story of that is on the internet, and look it up, and it's worth hearing him tell that story. It's a great story.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
But they didn't do that much actual filming on the base, on the flight line. There's a few scenes. But a lot of the flying scenes were done either out over the ocean or up in the desert at Fallon.
Okay, right. So we obviously seen the black F-5s. Were they painted especially for the movie?
Oh, yeah. I saw a report about the Navy doing camouflage testing, and I don't remember if a black jet was one of their options or not. But people have thought about black jets, and certainly for a night airplane, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't have any black F-5s. They did it for the movie just to be evil.
Yeah. And
it was supposed to be water-based paint. It was kind of a semi-gloss. I think it was supposed to be flat, but when I look back at some of my pictures, you could see some glare on the sides and stuff.
Yeah.
And then sometimes some of the planes had big panels of paint that just peeled off.
Okay,
Peeling the original.
that wasn't in the movie, I'm guessing, unless you can see it.
You can see it if you look closely, but it's not that noticeable. But then when our guys went to wash the paint off at the end of the filming, the jets, they look, just dingy. Like, it's just hard to wash off all that black paint, so it took a few weeks before they looked normal again.
Yeah, so overall, could you sum up your time on Top Gun or your experience with it?
What, the movie?
Yeah, the movie, yeah.
Amusing. I mean, it was fun. We went to the premiere, and I had seen I saw the movie up at Paramount. They invited all the instructors up to what was called the cast and crew preview, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time we saw the movie on a big screen, Paramount's beautiful theater. I mean, it was amazing. Just because, the sound was all cranked up, the close-up of the jets, all the action, all the colors. I mean, because Tony Scott is a master of visual impact.
Indeed,
yeah.
So, Bio, can you tell us what happened after your instruction at Top Gun? You went back to, I think, VF2. Is that correct?
Well, exactly correct. I mean, as I said, I was comfortable as a Top Gun instructor. I mean, after a while, you're going to figure it out, and so it becomes a manageable level of stress. Mm-hmm. You know how to do what you're supposed to do. It's the standards don't go down, but you can manage it. But still, I was looking forward to getting back to a fleet F-14 squadron. I missed the big fighter. I missed having a radar. I was ready to go back to the fleet when my tour was up.
Yeah.
Went back through the RAG for a quick refresher, and then I joined VF2 just about a month and a half before they went on deployment. Mm-hmm. At the F-14s that we were flying in VF2, I believe they had all been through rework.
Right. Okay.
That may sound mundane, but my perception as a RIO, as just a regular aircrew, was that our radars and our availability was better than it had been before. Mm-hmm. And I knew that in VF-24, some of our jets were old, had high flight time even back then. And so they needed to be reworked. And so the problem is, things steadily deteriorate until they get reworked. And then, so in VF2, we're flying newer jets or reworked jets. And I remember very good radars and good availability.
So, did you ever intercept any Russian bears or any of the bomber types on your cruises?
I did. You know what, Mike? I intercepted a couple of bears, and the bear is cool because it's big. Mm-hmm. And, it's got those counter-rotating propellers and, guns and antennas all over it and stuff. And I only intercepted a few bears in my career. Most often, and I don't have any good pictures of, a Tomcat flying on a bear. I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
Most often, I intercepted IL-38 MiGs. Mm-hmm. And those were boring. I mean, those guys would come by like once or twice a week, and we'd be going like, God, why do we have to escort them? They're not going to do anything, They're not...
Yeah.
So, hurry up, get out of here so we can get back to whatever we were doing.
Yeah.
Now, one time I was launched. I was the Alert 15, which means you sit in the ready room in your flight gear. And they said, and somebody called the ready room and said, tell the Alert guys to get in the jet and start it up. Mm-hmm. So we went out, and it was like probably 5 a.m. in the middle of the Western Pacific. And my pilot and I go, all right, this is good. So we go out and we start up the jet, because that means you're going to get launched. Mm-hmm. And then just as we're starting up, they say, launch the Alert fighters. And they came up on the radio, and we were the only ones that launched for some reason. I don't remember why our squadron, the other fighter squadron, didn't launch. Mm-hmm. This was way back in VF-24. So we took off. It's just before sunrise. And they go, and you could tell the voices. people are, and I mean, this story does not have a good ending. It's got a disappointing ending. It's just like, but you could tell the voices were excited.
Right.
Very professional. Your vector is so and so, alert, sharp. So we go heading out this way, and they go. Your signal is gate.
Right.
GATE. Do you know what gate means?
No.
Maximum afterburner.
Oh, right. Yes.
So my pilot goes, whoa. He goes, I've never heard that before. So we're up at, we climb up a little bit higher. We're up at 30,000 feet. You go to burner. Your fuel lasts a little bit longer, but really it's a terrible, waste of fuel. So we're zooming out at gate. And then after a couple of minutes, luckily they told us, okay, slow down to so-and-so. And they told us that we were going to intercept. My recollection, it was that it was either a Badger or a Blinder.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
And something rare.
Yeah.
And then they said, okay, it's like 160 miles away or whatever. I'm looking on my radar. I'm not seeing anything. And then they say, orbit where you are. Mm-hmm. I go, what? Yeah, orbit. So we sat there, we orbited, and then after about 15 minutes, they said, come home. It's like, God,
yeah, I think everyone wants that kind of elusive or rare aircraft to intercept, yeah.
So after I left VF2, I did an unexpected 6 years of staff jobs. That was not the plan. I thought I'd go do a quick staff job and come back to the fleet. But so then I was selected to be a squadron XO and CO, and I had to go to another refresher. And this time it was in VF 101 at Oceana, because Miramar was being handed over to the Marine Corps. Yeah. The Tomcats were being consolidated at Oceana. I mean, the whole world changed. So then I get back to the fleet, and the Tomcats are carrying bombs.
Yeah.
And there's, half the squadrons are Bs and Ds, and I was back in my beloved F-14A. Well, guess what? The young lieutenants, because I remember talking to these guys about this, they loved the A. The guys in VF-211 did not sit there and say, oh, I wish I was flying a D. No, the D was a great airplane, but these guys liked the jet they were in. Mm-hmm. And they were very professional about every aspect of the mission. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, Top Gun, the threat, everything became more complicated, more challenging. Mm-hmm. These guys just said, "How high is the bar? Okay, I'll jump that high." Mm-hmm. The Navy instituted a very effective and professional aircrew training program. Strike fighter weapons tactics training, and the lieutenants spent a lot of time. They spent free time in the ready room studying. When back in the old days, we would spend free time in the ready room, reading magazines or telling jokes. Yeah. Almost every flight was virtually every flight was a well-planned and well-executed training flight. Mm-hmm. Whereas back in the day, we would sometimes go out and just, do some training, but it's like it wasn't very challenging. Yeah. So everything became much more professional, and it was for the good of the Navy. It was very good for the Navy fighter community. Mm-hmm. And the lieutenants they did not lack enthusiasm. I mean, they had the same enthusiasm and everything that I had when I was a lieutenant.
So overall, how many hours did you get on the F-14, and did you enjoy it?
Wait, did I enjoy it? Okay, let me think about it. If I enjoy it, I'll get back to you on that. F-14 hours, listen to this, 2,499.7.
Wow, that is a lot of hours.
I know, but I could have had 2,500. And on my last flight, I went flying with Twist, and it was just a 1v0 because the squadron was doing a competitive bombing exercise. And they said, Skipper, if we give you multiple airplanes, to go out and have a multi-plane air, joyride, it's going to hurt us tomorrow. So I said, okay, I'll just take one plane and, do a short flight. So Twist and I went out and did a short flight, checked the block. And he goes, do you want to fly anymore? Well, I didn't know I was 3/10 of an hour short
Oh,
of 2,500.
that
So
is, yeah.
it's like, oh, let's go back. And then I did my logbook, and a couple of weeks later, I added up the time, and it's like, man,
Oh, God.
oh
Still
well.
can't complain, though, can you?
Mike, looking back on everything, I mean, I can't believe that I get to do all that. But also a word that comes to mind is rewarding. I mean, when
Yeah,
I was a teenager and I wanted to fly jets, I never thought I'd be saying it's rewarding,
yeah.
but it really is. And it's also, I've only touched the surface on living in the squadron, running a squadron, the things you learn from, your petty officers like, Lance Yost and Airman Ron Long and John Wendelin and all these guys, I've only touched the surface on the things that you learn from all these guys.
So, Bio, you're also an author. Could you tell us about this?
You don't miss much, do you, Mike?
I don't know.
One day, 2 years after I retired, I had a job as a defense contractor, and I was driving home from work, and I thought, I'm going to write a magazine article about making the movie Top Gun. And then within like a minute, I said, no, I'm going to write a book.
As you do.
So I talked to my wife, Laura, and she goes, yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. Well, I mean, of course I didn't have to ask her permission, but one, writing a book is demanding. And so it helps if you have the support of your significant other.
Oh.
And two, she's proven to be, a very good advisor, editor, etc. So I worked on the book. It was fun writing it, and then I worked on getting it published. And the thing about getting published is, I wanted to go with a conventional publisher. So I talked to some guys who self-published, and they're happy they did, but I wanted to go with a conventional publisher. So I had to get a literary agent and all that. And you know what, Mike? It was just a new field of endeavor. One thing that I found was a lot of aviation authors. I mean, they're very helpful. I asked a lot of people I asked them for questions, I asked them for assistance, and they were very helpful. So eventually, my book, I found a literary agent. We got a publisher, and my first book was published. You can see that.
Yep.
This was published in 2010. Mm-hmm. And it came out as a hardcover, but I like the soft cover, which is all that's available now, because it has a bonus chapter, and the price. I like the price.
The price.
And they're nice books. I mean, the color photos, still look great in the soft cover. So, one thing that writing a book has done is given me the exposure to I get to relive this. I do book signings. I meet a lot of people. I meet young teenagers who are enthusiastic. I meet guys my age who wish they had done this or tried to do it and it didn't work out for them. Mm-hmm. So it's given me an appreciation for my own experiences.
Yeah.
And it's been fun to relive them. And then after a couple of years, I decided to write a second book because I was getting a fair number of questions about, how did you get there?
Yeah.
So I wrote Before Top Gun Days.
Yeah.
And that also has, a lot of nice pictures, as you may be able to see. And then a couple of things about Before Top Gun Days. It talks about Pensacola and the F-14 rag. Mm-hmm. And I admit that it was challenging when I was going through my training. So at the end of the book, I think I put in 4 stories from VF-24 that say, okay, here's what I did when I got to my squadron and I learned to be a Rio. Mm-hmm. And so they talk about, okay, this is what you can do after all that training when you get, better at it.
Yeah. But one cool thing I've seen is your book's now in Japan, isn't it? Have they translated it into Japanese? Is that correct?
Today, I got a copy of the Japanese book.
Wow.
Now, a couple of years ago, it was translated into Chinese, and it's been available in Chinese for a couple of years also.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So, and that's pure coincidence. Mm-hmm. My original literary agent knew a gentleman from Europe who became a Chinese literary agent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know he was a former European fighter pilot. I don't want to go into any more details, but European fighter pilot. He married a Chinese lady, and he heard about my book, and so they purchased the rights, and they had it translated, and they sell it in China.
That's brilliant. No, that's
The Japanese translation was done by an aviation enthusiast who loves F-14s and the U.S. Navy. He did it as a project on his own initiative. But then, we had to get to the Japanese publisher, purchase the rights through my publisher. That's how it's done. Mm-hmm. And so it's just coming out now in June of 2017.
Oh, brilliant.
Japanese, yep.
Yeah, not bad. A big market there, I'm sure. So, have you got any projects on the go at the moment?
I hate to admit this, but I will. Because when I wrote the first book, I did not tell anybody. Mm-hmm. I told my wife. I didn't even tell my mom.
Wow, okay. Very secretive.
Yes. Well, that's because you don't know what's going to happen or how long it's going to take. So anyway, I am actually working on a third book right now.
Exciting.
And one reason that, which is going to cover VF2 and VF211. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've got to give credit to the new editor that I met a couple of years ago, Dave Robinson, who was a former Navy multi-engine pilot around 1960.
Oh, wow!
But he is a great editor and a great guy to work with, and so I'm working on book 3.
Well, we'll look forward to any progress on that. So,
don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. It's not going to come out this year, I'm sure.
Okay.
So,
it'll keep us updated, I'm sure.
Okay.
But so where can we find yourself and your work?
Oh, thanks for asking. My website is topgunbio.com, TOPGUNBIO.com. And that's where and I also have a Facebook page, Top Gun Days. If you type in Top Gun Days on Facebook, you should get there.
We should find you, yeah.
Yeah.
So great. So one thing I do want to ask is, do you have a favorite aircraft? I'm sure I can know the answer.
You know what? Of course, I love the F-14, but my longtime emotional favorite was the F-8.
Oh, okay. I was wrong.
I like the F-106. I mean, because it's when I grew up. When I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then also, I think the best looking jet fighter ever made was the Grumman F-11 Tiger.
Yeah, that is a beautiful one.
The long-nosed Tiger.
Yeah, yeah.
And, a clean Hawker Hunter is in that similar category. Just Definitely. A pure, pretty design. So those are some of my favorites. But whenever I get talking about airplanes, I like a lot of them. So.
Yeah. I think like a lot of us, it's really hard to pin down. But is there an aircraft you wish you could have flown or flown in?
Well, when I left VF-24, my first plan was to try to come to England and fly Tornadoes.
Ah, yeah.
I wanted to be a backseater in Tornado because a Tornado was new back then.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, it would be cool to go over to England, and I figured my Tomcat experience would be a good launching point and everything. But then when the Top Gun instructor opportunity became available, that I changed my direction. I never had another chance to go back and get in the Tornado.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, I've got to say, I think I was fortunate because I was of the right age to fly the Tomcat. I mean, I know it was in service, roughly 40 years. Mm-hmm. Let's see, 74. Oh no, to 2006. I'm sorry. Sorry. It's been 40 years, 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
I got my calculator right here. So I know it was in service for a period of time, but I was born in the right, span to fly the Tomcat with my eyesight. I couldn't be a pilot. And anyway, it all worked out well. So I was happy that I got to fly the Tomcat. I've got a couple of flights in the F-4, mm-hmm. Which, a great jet. And that's another jet when we were talking about comparing airplanes. Mm-hmm. I don't think any Phantom pilot would admit or would say, the Tomcat's better or Tomcat's always kicked my ass or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, I'll give them a good fight.
Yeah.
And they sure would, you know.
Yeah.
So
Bio, finally, do you ever get sick of talking about aviation?
nope, never do. And now I will admit that, and one, as you probably noticed, I can give you a long answer to any question.
Like most
I will
aircrew.
admit I'm not one of those guys who brings every aviation into everything.
Yeah.
You know, so when I'm at work, I don't work on aviation stuff now. I work on, you know, cyber stuff, but I don't translate everything into aviation. But, you know, when there's, you know, I guess it's like a dog, squirrel. So if it's,
If
I'm
there's
sitting
a
there
queue,
talking,
you're in there.
oh, airplanes. Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mike, I like listening to other guys tell stories also. I mean, we used to sit around the O Club and, you know, like sometimes it was just mostly guys, or, you know, once we were married and we needed to talk to each other to stay out of trouble, you know, we'd sit around and everybody would just tell stories about screw ups or great things or whatever. And it was just fun. It's for growing up wanting to be in that community and then to be in that community. It's, you know, just, I felt very fortunate.
Yeah, there's a great saying which I love, all aircrew say. There's two things they like talking about: aeroplanes and themselves. I think it's very true from every aircrew, but it's brilliant.
That's good.
So, Bayo, I just want to thank you very much for joining us and being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure for myself, and I know our viewers are going to love this interview, so thank you.
Mike, thank you. Thanks for having me. And if you want to do anything else, just ring me up.
Will do. Thanks very much.